Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, and today I am not joined by my co-host, John Carey. He is on vacation, and it is my job to fulfill both his humor and his excitement for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. So today we are going to run through a lot of Seahawks, a lot of Washington football, Washington basketball. We've got Gonzaga, we've got Wazoo football, we've got Kraken, we've got everything. And so with that being said, I'm going to jump right into it. Don't worry, I've got his value dogs in my notebook as well. I checked in with him. So with all that being said, here is a little Coyote picnic. All right, folks. First things first, let's talk Seattle Seahawks. Last week, they had a bye, which was needed after what was a bit of a trouncing. Not as trouncing, but a bit of what felt like the Seahawks needing to regroup. They lost to the Rams 26-20 in overtime, but that game felt like it was out of hand because of Geno's interceptions, the turnovers that were created by the Rams defense, and the Seahawks just kind of inability to capitalize on what was an amazing Jackson Smith and Jigba game. And so this upcoming week on Sunday, they play the San Francisco 49ers. What does that mean for the Seahawks? It means that they have not won a game against the 49ers since 2021, and that is not looking great. It means Kyle Shanahan has had this team's number for the last few years, including the 2022 season where the Seahawks went to the playoffs, everything like that. So what I want to do is break down what's been going on with the Seahawks team. Why are they underperforming? Where are the parts of their game that they can improve before diving into this bit of a scary 49ers game where they could end up being where the Seahawks could end up being 4-6 and looking at what is a long upward climb towards a potential playoff spot if they're able to win against the Cardinals and the Jets. And then I believe the Cardinals again. So they need to win 3 of these next 4 games, I think, to keep their playoff hopes alive. If they go 2-2, looking at this conference, looking at the rest of their season, it would be kind of wraps. So the Cardinals and Jets will be nice tests to see where this team really stacks up against the lesser teams with lesser talent. We'll say the 49ers are a scary team. We're not expected to win by any means. I think ESPN has us rated at approximately a 30% chance to win. So it's looking rough, but let's break down what's going on with this team. The Seahawks, last week we talked the Seahawks penalty problems, and those, nothing's changed in terms of their penalties per game. They're still top 3 in both offensive and defensive penalties per game. So we don't need to touch on that more. That's still a problem that the coaching needed to address, and we'll hopefully see that in this game against the 49ers. What I want to talk about a little bit more is the Seahawks' inability really to stop the rush. You look at this team's rushing defense. They're kind of a middling defense overall, kind of bottom 16, bottom half of the NFL, and a lot of that comes from a pretty poor rushing defense. The Seahawks allow 139.4 rushing yards per game at the moment. That is 7th worst in the NFL, and that's among the likes of the Carolina Panthers, the Dallas Cowboys, the Indianapolis Colts, as much as John would hate me saying that. The New York Giants, the Commanders are up there, but they have an explosive offense that the Seahawks just don't have. And then you've got teams like the Saints, the Jets, the Bears, the Patriots even, and these teams are not, playoff caliber teams. Everybody who follows the NFL knows that those teams are not going to the playoffs. The Seahawks' hopes of making the playoffs need to be improved by getting stellar linebacker and defensive line play, which can start helping their rushing defense. Now, we've talked a lot about the injuries that have derailed this team, looking at Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams being out. We need Ernest Jones to have a big game. And that acquisition from the Titans was very big, and we will hope to see him continue. His first game back, I think he had 15 tackles. Like, we need to see him perform as well as he did in that first game with the Hawks, and just perform as well as they can, because they don't allow a ton of touchdowns necessarily in terms of rushing touchdowns per game and situations like that. You saw them hold Kyron Williams. They were not, they're kind of a good bend, don't break defense. But when you look at this team as a whole, their rushing defense is what allows the opposing offenses to stay on the field for long stretches of time and be unable to stop the big chunk plays. You think about the last time we played the 49ers, a lot of those yards came from either dumps and screens and things of that nature, or they're just breaking through, finding holes in our defensive line and able to bust out for seven yards a carry instead of holding them to 2 or tackling them in the backfield. And so these issues really, really come up when you look at the Seahawks rushing defense statistics over the course of the whole season. Again, they only allow 1 touchdown, and really what it is, the Seahawks defense has been capable in the red zone. The reason that they've been in so many games is because they hold teams to less touchdowns on a statistical basis than average. But it's still just not enough. The Seahawks need to be able to stay on the field and produce offense in that way to keep their defense from having to deal with rushing the entire game. And that gets into another side of the football. Offensively, the Seahawks do not rush the ball enough. They are, I think, bottom 5 in rushing attempts per game. And we saw in the Rams game, they were unable to get any sort of momentum going. Granted, that Rams defensive line is pretty stout, but they've been unable to do it against the Bills, against the Rams, and we will see if they're able to do it against this 49ers team. But with DK being questionable, they might turn more to Kenneth Walker. They might try to turn more to JSN. It doesn't matter. If this team is unable to establish the run game, and I know everybody says this is kind of the cliche. They say, oh, you don't actually have to do that anymore. You do. You have to do that. And it's not necessarily establishing the run game, but it's showing that you can run the football for more than a half yard a carry. Kenneth Walker is a great running back, but this Seahawks offensive line has been unable to create any attacking opportunities. And Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker have had to rely on the screen passes that Ryan Grubb orchestrates. And that just hasn't been enough, as crappy as that is to say. So that gets into my next point. Again, I'm ready to go off the rails on this team. I want to talk red zone conversions. Now, looking at or not even red zone conversions, just kind of conversions in general. If you look at Pro Football Reference, you look at where the Seahawks are in terms of opportunities in the red zone, conversion rates, and then you look at third down conversions and things of that nature. Just how are they doing in higher pressure situations? And what I want to say, gosh, I've been holding this water for 45 seconds. Give me a second. What I want to touch on is the Seahawks have the 4th fewest red zone attempts in all of the NFL. They are smack in the middle of, again, the Cowboys, the Raiders, the Bears, the Browns, these teams that are unable to convert every single week. And we see it. These are at least bottom 10. You could maybe talk yourselves into the Cowboys being a bottom 8 team, and they're kind of the highest caliber along with the Bears. And these teams are just not good. The Bears, you see it with Caleb Williams, his struggling offensive line, and his inability to get rid of the football. The Seahawks are lucky that they have a quarterback in Geno Smith who has been able to bail out their offensive line and do the things that he does. He's been a really great quarterback, all things considered. So I have to give my props to Geno Smith. The more you look at the stats and how this team has performed, I don't think it's on Geno. I think it's on the line. I think it's on injuries. And I think what it really is the schematics offensively mean that this team is so feast or famine. And that comes down to this team cannot run the football. This team is unable to run the football. And so what happens with that is they're so feast or famine because they have 23 red zone attempts on the season, which again, you look at, I was talking about the Commanders offense. The Commanders have 44 red zone attempts on the season and 24 red zone touchdowns. They have more red zone touchdowns than we have red zone attempts. So you look at those two teams and that's the comparison. That's why the Commanders can have such a poor run defense. So moving in that direction, the Seahawks actually convert pretty well once they can get to the red zone. And I think that's where the issue lies. You look at their number of red zone touchdowns, and they only have 12, but that's a 52% red zone conversion rate. And you think the rest of the time, I guess we'll get to the next part. That's a 52% conversion rate. And generally that's pretty good. You know, if the Seahawks can get there, they should be able to score. And this team just is so feast or famine offensively. It creates this kind of negative feedback loop of like, hey, if this team cannot get it going offensively, then the defense is on the field for longer stretches of time. And then it just kind of progresses into a cycle of the later in the game. And you see this in their statistics of, you know, between the first and the fourth quarter where the teams are kind of on the back end of the game or on the front end of the game, the defense performs better early. And the later the game gets, they've been in the game for so long that it really can create issues for the defense, and they just get tired. You get worn down, and the rushing attack really can perform well later into the game. We know everybody talks about that as like kind of an unreal thing, but you know, Derrick Henry gets most of his rushing touchdowns in the latter halves of the game after Lamar Jackson has tired out these defenses for 2.5 quarters. You know. So it's something that the Seahawks need to work on. I'm not a football guru. I'm not sure how they address it. I'm looking at the statistics and breaking down this information. So the next thing that I want to touch on, I said, hey, they're converting in red zone touchdowns at 52% of the time. That for sure, obviously, means that they have converted, at least 80% of the of 11 times that they didn't convert into field goals. And that is where some of the other issues lie in this Seahawks approach. Maybe it's the analytics department, maybe it's the coaching staff. I don't know what it is. But the Seahawks, let me pull up this stat because it is crazy. The Seahawks have, here we go. The Seahawks have attempted 15 field goals on the season. They've attempted 15 field goals on the season. You compare that is bottom 6 again in the NFL. And you compare that to a team like the 49ers, like the Texans, the Commanders. Those are teams in the 20s, teams upper 20s, low 30s. Those teams kick field goals. They take the field goals that they can get. They take the points that they can get. And you look at this Seahawks team and you're like, man, what is their deal? Why are they not doing that? And it's because I think they have too much trust in their team in the red zone. Maybe they don't trust, is it Jason Myers? They don't trust Jason Myers. I know it's Myers. They've kicked 2 field goals within 20 yards, or within 20 to 29 yards, and they haven't kicked a field goal within 19 yards. So within 29 yards of the field goal post, they've kicked 2 field goals. Like I want you to take that into consideration. When this team gets in the red zone, they don't kick field goals. They go for it basically every time. And so with that comes a loss of, you think about this team's been in the red zone 23 times. They've kicked 2 field goals. They've scored on 12 of those. That's 9 trips to the red zone that were completely unsuccessful. And that is just too high of a number. This team is not efficient enough to assume that they can get those 4th and 1s. You know, they're not the Eagles. They're not a team like the Ravens who can kind of run around with Lamar or Derrick Henry. This is a team that needs to take points when they can get them and turn themselves into a 24 points per game scorer instead of an 18 or 19 points per game scorer. So that is just one of just a few, sorry, not one. That is just a few of the issues that, looking at the statistics for this team, looking at where their problems lie, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And obviously a lot of it comes from the penalties. You know, they can get in the red zone and then have, get backed out. We've seen that the last couple of weeks with errant snaps from the center or Geno tripping on the center's leg, things like that. Those are mishaps that should be fixed. But at the end of the day, this team needs to perform better, both in the red zone and offensively, so that their rushing defense and their defense in general isn't on the field for 35, 40 minutes a game. It needs to be way more balanced. I would love for this offense to be able to be on the field for 35 minutes a game, but it just doesn't happen. So, taking all of that information, looking at the upcoming 49ers game, which is so scary. The Seahawks are currently plus 6.5. The over-under is 49.5. And we don't know if DK Metcalf is going to be playing. And obviously the 49ers have Christian McCaffrey back. He's, a little limited, I would assume, but they have Christian McCaffrey back. And this team, the 49ers are rounding into form. The Seahawks need this win. They don't need it, but they, need it in the sense of like, if they're going to be competitive and try and get to that kind of 9-win mark that we think the playoffs are going to be, they need this game, because if they were to go 4-6, it's such an uphill climb. I look at this game, I look at how the 49ers have performed over the last few weeks. They won against Tampa Bay 23-20. They won against Dallas 30-24. They lost to Kansas City 28-18. Those 3 games were after we played them and lost to them 36-24 on a breakaway. I think the Seahawks can hang with the 49ers. I think the 49ers they seem like a beast because we haven't beat them in 3 years, but I think the Seahawks have the potential to hang with them. And if they can get, 1 or 2 great plays from DK, from Geno Smith to JSN, from Kenneth Walker, if they can get some breakout plays, that can happen. This offense has not necessarily been designed to do that without DK. And so if he is unavailable, that would be very concerning for me. But I think it's possible. Do I think it's going to happen? No. Would I take the Seahawks at money line in a bet? I would not. I don't think this game is going to work in the Seahawks' favor. But maybe John or I have them in a value dog. You never know. I'm looking at this game and I see a similar score that we saw last time, but I think it's going to be a little bit more high octane offense for the Seahawks. And I see it being maybe a 34-28 type game. That's what I see. I don't think it's going to be a defensive battle. Both of these teams' defenses are either a little older or a little battered and still figuring themselves out. Granted, second times teams play, so this is the second time they've played this season. Usually that means less points because defenses have seen them once before. So we will see what happens. But for now, I either think it's going to be high octane, high scoring, or it's going to be a rock fight in that sense of, maybe it's a 20-14 game. Either way, that plus 6.5 is interesting. We'll see when we get to value dogs if one of us does take it. And value dogs, sorry, they're going to be last. I know people are into the value dogs, but because it's me, I got to get through all of my big spiels. So next up, gosh, I'm rattling things off. I've been talking for 20 minutes already. Next up, I have to get through this because I don't want to talk about it more than I have to. The Washington Huskies against the number 6 Penn State Nittany Lions was a smackdown. And it went, last week John had some positive things to say about how Penn State had played kind of a cake schedule, but it went exactly as I predicted. God, the voice crack. It went exactly as I predicted. Penn State was able to control this game. They scored 4 rushing touchdowns, with 3 of them with different players. They had Tyler Warren, Bo Pribula, whatever that guy's name is, and Katron Allen, all stepping in with touchdowns. They had 2 guys with 95 or more yards, and 1 guy with 45. Their rushing attack was just so potent. And Tyler Warren had a couple passes. I think he just, they were kind of doing whatever they wanted late in this game because he is, I believe, their tight end. And one of Tyler Warren's touchdowns was kind of an insane jumping over the entire Huskies line and reaching over with his arm. So all in all, the Huskies just kind of got outplayed. Will Rogers goes 10 for 13 before basically getting subbed out, and the Huskies going to Damon Williams Jr. He goes 6 of 10 for 60 yards. Will Rogers had 10 completions for 59 yards. Will Rogers was so inefficient. It was a little scary. As a Huskies fan, you look at this game and you're like, man, do they have what it takes to beat UCLA next week to get a bowl game? We don't even know if that's for certain. The other side of the football, offensively for the Huskies, Jonah Coleman, 11 carries for 24 yards, 2.2 average yards per carry. Damon Williams had 10 carries for 38 yards, and his long was 43 yards. That means in the other 9 carries, he was -5. This Penn State defense was for real when it comes to the Huskies, halting the Huskies rushing game. The Huskies couldn't go anywhere with the football. They had under 200 total yards, and Penn State had, if I did my math correctly, 486 yards. This was just kind of a slaughtering. The Huskies could not hold the ball, and that's just kind of all I have to say. Obviously, if you were watching that game, you saw the early targeting against, I think his name's Thaddeus Dixon. I want to say that's right. Thaddeus Dixon. He gets an early targeting call on what looked to be a pretty good form tackle. He just kind of led with the crown into the chin of the guy's helmet, which, it's a fair targeting call. It just didn't feel like what would have been what the targeting call is used for. It's not used to stop a form tackle. You wrap the guy up pretty cleanly, but that really threw off that was going to be a third down stop, I believe, and it turned into a 15-yard gain for Penn State. They're able to score off that, and it really threw the tide of this game. So I think at the end of the day, you look at this game, you throw it out the window, you say, Huskies, you're not going to be the 8-4 team that we thought you were going to be at the beginning of this season. We talked about that early on. I don't see it anymore. I don't see this team, going 7-5. I don't see them being able to upset Oregon. Like, none of that is possible. What we want is for them to get a decent bowl game and for them to be prevalent when it comes to this Big 12. Currently, as it stands right now, has 4 of the top 5 teams, I believe, in Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana. All of these teams, I think 3 of them are in the college football playoff top 4, and then Indiana's sitting right on the outside waiting for Texas to lose one more time. It's just kind of a crazy year so far. The Big Ten is a monster conference, and I think we all thought it would be a little bit more of a cakewalk than it has been, and we could show like, hey, Pac-12 football is kind of where it's at. But maybe we need a little bit of a reset. John and I will talk about that later, I'm sure. But this Penn State game was one of those similar to the Iowa game where it was just like we were outmatched and outgunned in basically every facet of the defense in the rushing game, and Will Rogers has not proven himself yet. So we will see what this team does in the future. Looking at this UCLA game, I'm hit or miss for it. UCLA's quarterback is prone to throwing interceptions. They're 4-5. They started the season off horribly, so they've actually been on a decent turn. They won their last 3 games. One against Iowa. They won 20-17 on Saturday, and then they also beat Nebraska and Rutgers. 3 teams that UW had trouble with, and I'm not necessarily excited to play this team on the rise while they're also fighting for a bowl game. We will see. I would not necessarily take Washington minus 3.5 as the odds go right now. I think as a team, Washington may be able to run the ball. Maybe their quarterback is better. We will see. I haven't really followed the UCLA defense, but they held Iowa to 17 points. Like, this team has a decent run defense based on what we see from them just looking at the scores. So it's really tough to say, hey, this team can beat UCLA, get that bowl game. But for right now, you kind of have to trust it. UCLA's quarterback, like I said, interception prone. He's got under 2,000 yards so far on the season, only 12 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. And their main running back has the most yards of a running back on the UCLA team is 350. Like, this team spreads the ball well in terms of they don't have one player that does, that rushes the football. Like, they don't have a Jonah Coleman. They don't have a Denzel Boston who's got 9 touchdowns and 700 yards. They've got guys in all areas of the field that can do good things. So we will see how UW performs. I think UW can win this game. I am not looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a relatively low scoring, almost Seahawks like, 23-20 type game. And whichever one comes out on top will be ecstatic, because Washington will either have earned a bowl game, which is all they can hope for, considering their next game is against Oregon, I believe, which is a little scary. And then UCLA, if they win this game, they then have a chance to go for the bowl game. So all exciting things for both sides of this game. And man, it's tough to be a Huskies fan right now when you're looking at Wazoo sitting at 18 and 8-1. So with that being said, let's jump to Wazoo's game. Wazoo on Saturday, they beat the Utah State Aggies 49-28. That's exactly what we thought was going to happen. I can't sit here and say, oh, this was a tight game. The John Mateer accounted for 5 touchdowns. He threw for 4. He rushed for 1. Wayshawn Parker had 2 rushing touchdowns. This team had, in terms of total yards, they were actually pretty comparable, but Utah State had at least 2 turnovers. Yeah, they had a fumble loss and an interception. And so that's kind of the difference in the game. Wazoo is a team that is able to turn teams over, and they are efficient enough. John Mateer goes 18 of 24 for 179 yards, and they're able to run the football. They actually ran the football 45 times. Like they were willing to just give the ball to Wayshawn Parker, to let John Mateer run. Schlenbacher had 10 carries. They were willing to let the clock run out, and they still scored 49 points. Like, this team is a potent offense. They scored 14 points in 3 quarters. Like, this team is very, very offensively gifted. And a lot of that lies on Mateer's shoulders and his ability to escape pressure in the pocket and make plays on the run. And so we will see. I really think Washington State has a chance here to both make the college football playoff if they can finish out this season strong. Like, I really do think that they have an outside chance. And maybe make a little bit of a splash. I don't think they're going to win in whatever game they play, and if they make the college football playoff, I don't want to hold out hope that they will win that game, but I think that they will have at least the capability to score. It might end up being like a 24-35 game, but it won't be a shutout. It won't be a absolute routing. I think that they would hold up better than Washington did against an Indiana team if Indiana's sitting at 5 and Washington State's at 12. So things of that nature are just fun things to look forward to when it comes to Washington State. In terms of this Utah State game, like we said, exactly what was expected. And when it comes to next week, they play New Mexico, the New Mexico Lobos. And you're looking at that and you're like, man, this game looks to be pretty easy. New Mexico played Utah State a few weeks back and they won 50-45. So they are offensively as potent as Washington State, but their defense is where they lack. So we will be looking for John Mateer to capitalize, and the New Mexico's quarterback again is a little bit prone to turnovers, and so he's got 11 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Like, Washington State, as I just said, is capable of taking the ball away from opponents, and so we're going to use that to their advantage, hopefully, and they can take over this game, win another one, end up 9-1, and hopefully, I think they have one more game. I need to look at their schedule real quick. I think they have one more game, if not two. No, they don't. They have 2 more games. They've got New Mexico this upcoming weekend, and then they've got Oregon State the following weekend and Wyoming as their Thanksgiving weekend game. So good for them. They should beat Oregon State, they should beat New Mexico, and they should beat Wyoming and end the season 11-1 and be in the conversation for that college football playoff. Will they get in over a 2-loss SEC team? Who knows? But that is definitely something to consider. Whew. I don't know how solo podcasters do it, but this is a journey. Next up, we are going to talk college basketball. So, I got to get this off my chest. John, the Gonzaga Bulldogs only win 88-80 against Arizona State, and they had to close it out shooting free throws. So kind of a tougher game, all things considered. Braden Huff with the max points in this game, scoring 21. I would say Arizona State actually played pretty well. They had 2 guys combined for 41 points of the 80, and then their bench dropped, 19 points? So all things considered, Arizona State played pretty well. Caliph Battle scores 19 for Gonzaga. The one guy who really hasn't done much this season that I've been a little intrigued by is Ben Gregg, John's boy. He only scores 2 points against Arizona State and only plays 11 minutes. Him and Graham Ike, granted, maybe this is hey, let's rest them, give Braden Huff, give Ajayi some time to play with the boys. But they only played 11 minutes and 14 minutes, while Huff plays 26 and Ajayi plays 29. So definitely an interesting spread of minutes going around. I think, if I were to guess, I would say that Mark Few used this as a game to give Ajayi and Huff time to gel with Hickman and Nembhard and Battle, while kind of letting the team flow offensively. It's at home, it's at Gonzaga. They still score 88 points. It just, kind of a little bit of crunch time concerns there. As I checked in on this game, they were up 76-72, I believe, at one point. And they were able to pull away because they're efficient at the free throw line, which we cannot say about my Washington Huskies. But an interesting game. Next up, both Gonzaga and UW play University of Massachusetts Lowell. The Riverhawks? I don't know. I'm not sure about this game, but Gonzaga should destroy them. UMass has scored 98 points a game, which is impressive for them, and they've only allowed 66.5 points against them. So they're 2-0. They're looking efficient offensively, but I don't think they've played anybody to the caliber of Gonzaga. Yeah, they beat St. Peter's, and they beat, I think, Riverside 115-59. So a little bit different of little bit difference in competition there. Expecting Gonzaga to pull away. That is happening on Friday. So hopefully we can tune in and watch that one. Not much else to say about Gonzaga. John, I'm sure, would love to talk more about it if he was here, but we will pass through lightly. They're 2-0. We'll keep it pushing and see what happens next. They've jumped to 4 in the ESPN rankings. That's exciting for them. Next up, we have got my Washington Huskies, and we need to talk about their tough loss to the University of Nevada Wolfpack. This game, we talked a lot about how good Great Osibor was, and gosh golly, were we shocked at how poorly he played. He goes 0 for 7 in 30 minutes played from the field, 0 for 1 from 3, 3 of 4 from free throws for 3 points. Great Osibor, this is not the type of performance that we were expecting from him coming in as a Huskies team. We were expecting him to average, 15 points a game. And if he scores 10 more points, the Huskies can win this game. If he's better, this team can win against even a team that's as good as the Wolfpack. We know how great that team is. And the Huskies just were not able to perform. Field goal wise, they shoot 33.9% from the field, 19 of 56. Just really inefficient. And the Huskies didn't play Davis, so that's an interesting development. I think maybe he was dealing with something, or maybe they wanted to give him a day off or a game off just to get right after what was a pretty tough one. But Iheanacho comes in, scores 15 points as the kind of backup starter, which is awesome for him. Definitely just kind of a different setup in the way the game was run by the Huskies against the Nevada team than it was in their first matchup, or in their first game this season, sorry. And happy to say that they look better. They have been underperforming, and still, they could have won this game against Nevada. They should have blown out UC Riverside, UC Irvine. I don't remember who their first game was. But this is going to be a better team than I think previous years. On the Nevada side of the ball, they were just efficient. That's kind of Nevada's thing. They slow the game down. They make good decisions. They shot 40% from 3. They really didn't shoot amazingly well from the free throw line, but they shot 25 free throws and made 17 of them, while the Huskies only shot 8 for 13. So they were just kind of better in all facets of the game, and we let them dictate the pace of play, which is not what you want to do when you're playing the Nevada Wolfpack. So we will see what happens moving forward. I'm expecting UW to win this game against UMass. That one is on Sunday, I believe, Sunday the 17th of November. And Great Osibor, hoping this is kind of his get-right game. Like I said, UMass has the capability of scoring a lot of points. They're currently averaging 98, like I said. So this is a game where UW is going to have to be efficient offensively, and we will see how they perform. We need them to be able to push the pace of play or slow it down. Pick one of the two, but they need to find an identity and stick to that the rest of the season. So we will see what happens with them moving forward. But for now, even though they're 1-1, I've actually been pleasantly surprised at how they've played going into their third game. I'm excited to hopefully be 2-1. Next up, we've got our Washington State Cougars, and the Cougars actually just played Idaho on, that would be November 11th, so Monday. I'm recording this on Tuesday night for transparency's sake. And Wazoo just kind of outplayed them. They shot 51.5% from the field, 31% from 3 to Idaho's 36.5% from the field and 21% from three. So they just kind of outpaced them. They ended up winning this game 90-67. It was in Wazoo. I think it was everything that we expected. They're now 3-0 and, pacing along well in the West Coast Conference. This is what we expected from this Washington State team. They're going to be good against, the worst West Coast Conference teams and, the Big Sky teams that they play, like the Eastern Washingtons and things of that nature. They'll push the pace. They'll win these games. Their real tests are going to be against Gonzaga, against any sort of team that has the ability to keep up with them pace of play-wise and just talent-wise. Like, Wazoo does not have the most talent, so we will see how they perform as their season goes along. In terms of their next game, they play Iowa, so that's going to be a big game for them. See how they perform against actually what I think would be a slower-paced kind of big man style of play. They play Iowa on Friday, November 15th, so that'll be an exciting one. Check in on that. Also, just want to point out, Nate Calmese had 18 points against Idaho, and he is a Washington transfer. So love to see our Washington transfers leave the team and get better, as happens in all Seattle sports. So excited to see more of that as this season comes along. Okay, we've got a couple more things. I know this has been a lot of me, but I hope it's good enough. The Kraken, they've played one game since we talked last week and since I checked on them, and that was against the Golden Knights. They won it in overtime off a nice Jared McCann's goal, and they're currently down 2-0 to the Columbus Blue Jackets. As I'm recording this, they're starting the second period. I don't really have any thoughts that have changed for the Kraken at this moment. The Kraken are a middling to subpar team, I think, and nothing that they have done in the last week has changed that for me. They had a good game against the Golden Knights, but I'm not expecting anything more from them at this point in the season. We will check in more as it goes along. If they're able to turn this Blue Jackets game around, maybe they'll be closer to the top of the table. But for right now, I'm not trusting anything that the Kraken have done. They've lost 7 of their last 9 now, so that one win has really changed their style. Not. And with that, I think that's it. I think there's no Sounders. The Sounders play, I believe, on the 23rd against, I think it's the LA team. Let me make sure. I will check that for you real quick. The Sounders play LAFC on November 23rd at 7:30 Pacific time. So that is going to be an exciting game. We'll talk more about that next week because it'll still be, it's not this weekend, but the next weekend before Thanksgiving. So we will be excited to talk about that game when it comes up. John does not want to talk about any LA teams, I am certain. But that'll be a fun one, and it is single game elimination now. So we can kind of look into that in detail, and we will definitely be live reacting to that on Twitter. So check out the Twitter. Okay, if you've made it this far, I appreciate it. I also know that the YouTube is going to be popping because the Value Dogs went off last week. Underdogs last week in week 10 of the NFL, they go 11-3 against the spread, putting them up to 48% on the season, which is a huge jump considering they've been pretty poor the last few weeks, if I do say so myself. So bringing them back up from what was 44.5% 2 weeks ago when we did our Value Dogs. So that is exciting. As for our records last week, man, that was some exciting stuff. John we go 5-1 as a duo. John goes 3-0. He hits Bengals +6. He hits Dolphins +1, and he hits the Cards +1 against the Jets. One of us was bound to lose that one, and it just happened to be me. So with all that being said, John is now 13-14. If you've been following John for the last few weeks, you're making money. And with that, if you've been following me for the last few weeks, you've been pretty 500. I've been 1-2 or 2-1 for the last few weeks, but 2-1 last week, and that brings me to 11-19 on the season. So things are looking up for me. Oh, I'm sorry. John is 14-16. Those numbers didn't add up in my head, and I had to check it. John is 14-16. So, exciting stuff from our boy. With that being said, here are my NFL Week 11 Sound Up Seattle value dogs. Starting off, I am going to take the Chiefs plus 2.5 against the Bills. Anytime you have Patrick Mahomes as an underdog, you take that money. You take it. I don't know if this has stayed or if this will stay. I doubt this will stay at plus 2.5, but I would expect it to go towards the Chiefs. So if you can get it at 2.5, take that. That's kind of all there is to say. Like, the Bills have been good, but I don't think they're going to have all of their receivers. And even with Amari Cooper, like, the Chiefs have just proven time and time again that they can win any close game, and I expect this game to be close. I don't expect, everybody's been talking about the Chiefs and how they, I had a protein shake before this podcast, how they do the little things well. And I think even against the Bills, the same things are going to happen. Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes is the matchup of the year every single year in the NFL right now, and it's not going to change. I think it's still going to be a close game. Take the points. If it was Bills plus 2.5, I probably would have said take the Bills plus 2.5. This game is going to be decided by 2 or less points, and in the fact that it's the Chiefs, you take that every day of the week. My second pick for Sound Up Seattle Value Dogs Week 11, I'm going to take... I think I'm going to take the Colts plus 3.5 against the Jets. I was in favor of the Jets last week, and I've officially decided that the Jets are getting too much favor. They're actually plus 4 at the time of this recording. It changed since I prepared my value dogs. The Colts are plus 4. People are taking the Jets minus 3.5 against the Colts, and I just don't see it. The Jets have been so bad. Granted, this is kind of the time that they can turn it around still, and I've holding out hope. But the Colts have actually been kind of the underdog, magic piece of the season so far for me. I've hit them, I think, the most out of any team. And I trust that they're going to be able to get right. I trust that they're going to give the ball to Jonathan Taylor against a weaker Jets defense than people thought that it would be going into the season. And Jonathan Taylor, if he's healthy, can control the pace of this game. The Jets have better offensive weapons. They probably have a better quarterback in Aaron Rodgers than either Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson. But Jonathan Taylor as a whole and the Colts defense versus the Jets defense, I think this game will be close. It'll probably be low 20s to high teens range. And with that, the Colts are always, competing in that area. So expect the Colts to be within a field goal here and take plus 4. If you were, following along with me. My last pick, I talked about it earlier. I have to do it. The Seahawks are plus 6.5 against the 49ers. And that is just right where I want this team to be. I think was it 12-point loss? Or maybe it was an 8-point loss. I don't remember if they lost 36-24 or 26-34. But that late touchdown against the 49ers early in the season, I think that was misrepresentative of how the 49ers have played the last 3 games. Like I said, they've been close, even against a Jets team and against the Buccaneers who were riddled with injuries. I think the Seahawks team, especially if DK Metcalf is returning, I think they compete with the 49ers. The 49ers have had the Seahawks number for quite some time, but now is the time to come back. Now is the time to strike. They need to get to 500 here, and this is the week to at least be within 6 points, or within 7 points, I guess, because you get that 6.5. All right. Now, for those of you who really want to win money, I've got John Kerry's picks for his value dogs. Don't worry. He picked 3 different ones from me, which, I guess I got the first round of picks, so that's nice of him to give me that benefit. Here they are. John's Week 1 value dogs. He has the Atlanta Falcons, or not Week 1, Week 11 value dogs. John has the Atlanta Falcons plus 2.5 against the Cleveland. I'm doing this so horribly. Against the Denver Broncos. What am I saying? The Falcons are plus 2.5 against the Denver Broncos. My handwriting is horrible. I understand where he's coming from. The Falcons have a pretty potent offense. The Broncos have a decent defense. They hold teams to low-scoring games. The question is, can the Broncos score on this Falcons team and hold them offensively? And I think the Broncos can. There's a reason I didn't take this line. I think it's because the Broncos defensively had, like, the Seahawks held this Falcons team to 14 points and were able to score 34. I think the Falcons are kind of a fraudulent team. So I worry about this line, but if you're trusting John Kerry, take those 2.5 points from the Falcons. John's second pick, he ended up going with the Washington Commanders plus 3.5 against the Eagles in an NFC East matchup of the season. This is probably the best game of the NFC East that we're going to get. Eagles Commanders is a great one, and it really is a test of, hey, are the Commanders for real? Can they compete against high-level opponents? We saw them last week. They were favored by 2.5 points against the Steelers, ended up losing by 1. I think it's a different style where the Eagles are going to be able to control the ball more, and the Steelers are going to kind of take deep shots, and the Steelers run the ball and then pass deep, kind of like the Seahawks do when DK is playing. But the Eagles are a different beast. If AJ Brown is not playing, this line looks amazing because the Eagles don't really know what to do offensively. They kind of just give the ball to Saquon if AJ Brown isn't playing. And the Commanders have looked good the entire season. Like, you can't complain about where they've been at. They lost by 1 to a Steelers team that is 7-2 right now. The Steelers are a big threat. So we will see. I like this line a lot. I was a little scared by it, but AJ Brown's been off and on with hamstring injury all season. I've got high hopes for this one. John's last line, the last line of the day, the last bit of the pod before I sign us out. John has the Cincinnati Bengals plus 1.5 against the Are they Los Angeles? Is it the Los Angeles Chargers? Am I dumb? Bengals plus 1.5 against the Chargers. Either way, I'm a fan of this one. I think the Bengals need this win to be able to stay relevant in the AFC North. This is a game where it's going to be either it kind of has to be offensively potent for the Chargers because the Bengals are going to score 28 points. Like, that's a given. The Bengals are so good offensively, and T. Higgins is supposed to be back. Please, for my fantasy team, I need this man. T. Higgins is supposed to be back, and that would just create even more problems for the Chargers defense. So we will see. I think J.K. Dobbins for the Chargers needs to have a big game. And then Ladd McConkey needs to have a big game because this Chargers team has not really shown that they can keep up with the top tier offenses in the league. So I love this line for John, plus 1.5. It's a bet on the Bengals to win purely by outscoring their opponent. We'll see if the Chargers defense can hold them to anything substantial. But for now, I'm a fan of this Bengals plus 1.5 line. And there you have it. Those were the value dogs. That was the podcast for the week of November 14th when this is getting released. I hope you enjoy. There's going to be some more shorts, some more stuff coming out on our YouTube, so please check that out. I hope you enjoyed my lovely picture of John that I drew in paint in approximately 35 seconds. So I hope you enjoyed that. And if you enjoyed this episode of Sound Up Seattle, please feel free to give us a follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. We love to have people watching the pod, and we love to hear from you guys. One question that I have, obviously for the YouTube comments, if you guys have made it this far, the Mariners are lightly linked to a few free agents this year. And there's a few that I think are really good for the Mariners. So of these 3 that I'm about to name, I would like to know who you guys think is the best addition that the Mariners could make. We've got Christian Walker at first base, Alex Bregman at third base, or Gleyber Torres at second base. Those are all positions of need for the Mariners. And all free agents that have good value. I don't think they're going to go for a Pete Alonso. Obviously, if they go for a Juan Soto, that would be great, but I just don't think they have they're the market that Juan Soto is going to be looking for. So there's some Mariners discussion to be had as the offseason continues, and I would have loved to get into it, but it's already 10:15 p.m. on Tuesday night, and I have other things to do. I have to go to bed. I'm tired, and I've got an interview tomorrow. Exciting news for me. Continuing with the outro, you can find Sound Up Seattle on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word. You can find me, Tyler, at TyCart50, everywhere it's important. And you can find John somewhere in Seattle. He's vibing right now on vacation. He didn't have his equipment, so I just had to do this on my own. I hope he's doing well. I hope his Colts win this week, specifically for my value dog. And with all that being said, gosh, it's a Tuesday night. I'm looking at this slate of games this week, and all I can say is, let's go Hawks, baby.